on Netflix. Oh, Love is Blind. Could you guys have been any more predictable? It feels like all of the stereotypes that exist, they were trying to like pin onto AD. These just limited like their personas and made them one-dimensional. Hi everyone, and welcome back to another installment of Small Acts, which is a web series where I take seemingly small instances of pop culture and critique them through a feminist lens, or at least try to, in an effort to shift perspective. So let's take a look at what's going on in the world of women. In today's video, I want to discuss something that has quite literally been on my mind since the last season of Love is Blind, and especially now since some of their past cast members have been popping up back into the spotlight. Over the past couple of years, a lot of Netflix watchers, myself included, have been lured into the show by the promise of a genuine show about people just trying to find love. And while it may have started that way, especially in like season 1, I feel like it has absolutely transformed into something different. I think the show has been trying to play and was edited to appease the algorithms. I think the algorithms, pop culture, society only magnifies what is currently the status quo in society. Like we do around here, I'm going to critique it, or at least try my best to talk about this through a feminist lens and how that really just kind of like affects the state of women today. Watching this season honestly gave me the weirdest, eeriest feeling, because I feel like they were trying so hard to fit every single character into a stereotype or into something one-dimensional versus trying to allow all the characters to be themselves and be human, which is multi-dimensional. But before we get into all the good tea, let me just give a disclaimer. Like, I am aware that this is reality TV. I am not trying to judge the characters, but rather the idea of them that is presented, and quite literally high-key judging Netflix for what they portrayed on that show. So let's dive into it. I want to start off with my personal reaction. I don't know if it's just my frontal lobe being developed now, or I'm just a bit more aware, but it just gave me the ick. It felt so highly produced, overly dramatic, overly edited, and just very much on brand with reality TV, which I feel like is what they try to tell us that it's not. I feel like it's marketed as something that is like YouTube, like a vlog, like very natural, and I feel like it has transformed into something that is just highly edited. If you've been watching the show from the beginning, then you know by now that you almost always end up with like a villain, a couple that almost doesn't make it but ends up making it, a couple that no one expects, and then of course like the sweethearts that you know are just gonna get married from jump. And this time I could absolutely tell who those were gonna be from like the first or second episode. I also felt like it was subtle, but there's a distinction between how the men were treated and portrayed and how the women were treated and portrayed. But that brings me to my next point that I want to talk about, which is the stereotypes. Oh, Netflix. Oh, Love is Blind. Could you guys have been any more predictable? I mean, the cast made it easy, but the stereotypes were just so blatant. And I mean, it wasn't just AD. They made sure to touch gender, they made sure to touch race. I guess in that case it was equal. Like, just to be a bit more serious, as one of the only women of color, let alone black women, it feels like all of the stereotypes that exist, they were trying to like pin as much of them as possible onto AD. I mean, she was portrayed as like the loving host mom, but also like the hypersexualized vixen in the same breath. She was portrayed as the one that advocated for everyone and like the one that was going to say something to protect someone, but then in the same breath, the one that couldn't like stand up for herself or was getting the crappy end of the stick. All in what, the span of 10 episodes? Like, make it make sense. I think these stereotypes too, they were reinforced not only by how like the show was edited and you know what we were shown as the audience, but also how the men treated her and the women treated her, referenced to her, and like spoke about her as well on the show, which I think is something to call out, because when we talk about like these gender issues, I feel like people always make it out to seem like, oh, it's against like men versus women, boys against girls, like the battle of the genders, and we don't usually acknowledge the fact that women, other genders, can be perpetrators of misogyny and sexism as well. And I feel like that is what happened on the show. The way she was pigeonholed, I think, highlights a broader issue of how black women women of color, point blank period, just women in media are portrayed. And I think this is overall why I think dating shows can be particularly harmful for women and women of color. Like, especially if the writers and producers are not consciously trying to build the show, foster an environment on the show, create a narrative within the show that is anti-misogynistic and anti-racist. The default will be the stereotypes that are the status quo in the society. And like the same thing to a lesser degree happened with like Sarah Ann. She was made out to be like the pick-me girl. I'm not gonna come to her defense because like her actions were her actions. Even Chelsea, like how she was portrayed, edited, it seemed like it was just different than how she showed up in like her other relationships. And I'm not saying that we are the same in all of our relationships, but like at the reunion, all of the other women were talking about how, oh, Chelsea's always this like strong woman. So it was just so hard to watch her being so vulnerable in the different scenes where obviously she and like her partner were, yeah. I think it also happened with Amy, where she was kind of like one-dimensional too, where they just kind of painted her and her partner as like, oh, the sweetheart, and like she's just gonna get married, la 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 la. Even though I think they tried something when they tried to mention the fact that she didn't want to get on birth control, but I feel like it wasn't in the way that we interpreted it to be. So I think it was more to play into like purity culture rather than, oh, my body, my choice. But I'll talk about that later. Yeah, the women I mentioned were kind of boxed into like certain roles, so you would know what to expect from them in the other episodes. Whether it was a villain, the pick-me girl, the good girl, the sidekick, these just limited like their personas and made them one-dimensional. Also, just kind of like fed into the patriarchal ideologies that already like permeate society. So it lacked complexity, and I think because of that, it ended up being disempowering to them. One thing I wanted to point it out that I don't usually see in these commentary type of takes when it comes to like these reality shows is just like how the show itself kind of perpetuates what is already in society. And I want to talk about this through the lens of like the power dynamics that we see. I think in this season it didn't come up as much, but like just like little things like, oh, the guy has to ask for the hand in marriage, or the guy is kind of like leading the conversation about like how fast the relationship goes. When Sarah Ann comes back and is like asking whoever the guy was that she was asking, like, hey, like, are you free? Are you basically down for us to date? And are you available? Even though she knows that he is in a relationship, is like, first of all, like, I know that is just icky, but in that case, he has the power, because he has the power to decide between like which two girls he wants to choose. I also think though, in kind of like the same situation, Chelsea had the power in her dynamic between Jimmy and Trevor, where she was kind of choosing between them. What they showed portrayed power to be was like whoever has the most options is at like the top of the game, and if you don't have options, you're kind of like at the whim of being chosen. And I feel like that's low-key what it is like in society. When we got a bit further into the season 2, past the dating stage, out of the pods, we saw a bit more of like some of the dynamics that we would see. What I really liked about, I think, Amy and Johnny was how they kind of related to each other versus Clay and AD. I feel like Clay was always trying to make his work and like bring up the fact that, oh, he's working and he has XYZ financially, and try to like make AD feel bad about that, and that was kind of used. Whereas with Amy and Johnny, again, this is probably just how it was edited to seem to us, but it just felt like they were both on more equal footing. Even how they both came to the conversation about, oh, what are we gonna do about birth control, for example? If you don't want to go on birth control, what are we going to do? So it felt like both of them were coming together to solve a problem, knowing both of them had equal say, versus with like a Clay and AD, it definitely did not give that. I would love to hear your guys' thoughts about how you think Love is Blind shows power dynamics, because it's something that I know isn't really talked about a lot when it comes to like these television dating shows and relationships. So another thing I want to talk about is like intersectionality, which isn't something that's usually brought up again when talking about reality dating, because I guess it's not that deep, but it has to be spoken about, because how many people of color are on this show? What, like 4? Clay, AD, Kenneth, Sarah Ann? Question mark. and probably a handful were at the first part that didn't even make it out of the dating round. But first, let's recap on what intersectionality means. In their definition of intersectionality, Els, Quest, and Hyde emphasize that an intersectional perspective entails first a recognition that all people are characterized by multiple social identities, for example, gender, race, sexual orientation, and age, and that these categories are intertwined and that the experience of each category is linked to the other categories. Okay, so what that basically means is that you, me, being a woman, I will not and cannot experience that separately from me being black. So I experience life as a black woman rather than being black or being a woman only. I wanted to talk about this because of just this one part that came up that was crazy to me. When Brittany and Kenneth, they were talking, she was saying, oh, I know you identify as a black male. What? What do you mean? He is. It's not something you can't choose how you want to express like he's black. It was interesting to me because I feel like when these shows come on or when these spaces are created, we want to pretend that it's colorblind, gender blind, like everything is a level playing field, and the things, the stereotypes, the ideologies that affect and sway society don't apply here, when they absolutely do, because I think it's in the same way or the same breath that everyone was over sexualizing AD. So I don't know how they're gonna do it. Interested to hear you guys' thoughts below, but people's identities and like intersectionality needs to be something that is at the forefront of the minds, some training, something, I don't know, but I just thought that was interesting how colorblind these shows and these spaces usually pretend to be, when little things like that are just proof that they aren't. The last thing I want to talk about with regards to Love is Blind that is not spoken about enough, and it's actually a good thing, is how there's this common thread of women empowerment that is usually every season, really, even if it's in the pods or afterwards, they usually leave being really good friends, and even if they don't find like a love prospect, a husband, they've found friends for life, which is something I think is really admirable. And we all know how much women need community and sisterhood, so I think that's a good thing that isn't usually like brought up. Well done, Love is Blind. And I know I did not do a whole thing on Clay and AD because that was just overdone. There's so many other videos out there to do that, but what I will say is that I think his mother carried the entire show on her back. It was ironic how she represented how life would just be okay, like you'll be content or even better whether or not like you find the one or you're hurt or you even get divorced. Like in the face of infidelity, you'll be okay once you have yourself. Whereas this show was all about, oh, people trying to find love and wanted to find love because they felt like they were ready for it, and it was almost as if their life was incomplete without finding the one. I thought that was like hilariously ironic. My parting words on Love is Blind and just any other like dating, love, reality TV, like at the end of the day, guys, it's entertainment and it is meant to sell. It's meant to make you emotional, to make you irate. It's meant to evoke these strong emotions in you to get you to continue watching. So with that in mind, don't like forget to have like that critical lens when you're watching. And as a viewer, as we're engaging in like these conversations online and the commentary, let's just be mindful of like stereotypes and narratives that we can help to like perpetuate, ones that are oftentimes harmful. That's it for the video, guys. I hope you enjoyed it. Excited to hear your thoughts and comments in the comments below. Until next time, with love from Chels. Bye.